get started. Welcome everyone. It's our Unit Masters session 9. We're here with Jeanne, who's one of the co-creators of the Sophia robot and is a super accomplished entrepreneur and investor. I am very excited and grateful that she's here with us to share her expertise, insights, and experience. She's now started a foundation, so very excited to hear about that, her motivation and her intentions there. And yeah, we're going to be beginning with sort of her sharing her journey, her insights, her experience. Then we're going to be asking her a series of questions, like a mini interview, and then we're going to open it up to the audience for questions. So please put your hands together for Jeanne.
Thank you, guys. Good afternoon, good morning. I don't know where you are. So I'm so glad to be here. And Michael, thank you for inviting me. So I only object to that word, like super accomplished. I think it's more like a trial and error adventure for my life. So I don't know how much I should go back, but maybe just quickly touch upon the sort of the key things that happened. Because I mentioned to you, actually, it would be more like talking about a series of accidents and serendipity, right, with my career. So, yeah, sorry, actually, Siri is on. I don't know what it heard. So I started my career with the Swire Group. I didn't really know what I wanted to do after college. And so I joined their management training program, came back to Hong Kong from the US, and spent a year in Swire Shipping, a year in Reebok, Marathon, and a year in Cathay. Then I discovered I wasn't that interested in services, so I joined Apple as a forecaster. So at that time, they needed somebody to basically work the numbers to forecast sales. So I signed up, and it was interesting because it's a company that is creating new products and new categories of products. So there's no history to do any forecast. So for example, when we were launching Newton, it would be somewhere between 1 and 10 million. So that was sort of a fun thing. I was with Apple for about 7 years, and I moved into marketing in between that time. So I was actually product manager for Newton. There's a lot of funny stories about that, how I learned to do the handwriting so that Newton would recognize it. And then my last product at Apple was the iMac. So that was also interesting because Steve Jobs, it was the second coming of Steve Jobs at that time. And so, so he was the product manager, he was the media placement expert, he was actually everything for the iMac. So we call him like Kim Jong-il sometimes. But it was fun working for him. It was like a completely new genre of Apple going into the consumer market. So I learned a lot there, how you actually need to create new retail channels, because Apple traditionally has been mostly strong in education. And, in enterprise, only to the extent of the CEO always uses a Mac and everybody else uses Windows. So that was their entry into enterprise. So we had to, like in Asia Pacific, we had to create new channels. We actually had to find new application developers. We actually bundled with a Windows emulator, which drove Steve Jobs really mad because he thinks the macOS was the perfect operating system. But of course, in Asia, everybody uses their consumer computer to play games. And there was no games for Mac. So we had to bundle an emulator for Windows. So that was a fun time. And then I left, and because 7.5 years was a long time, and 1 year under Steve Jobs was a long time. So I left, went into the enterprise world with 3Com. It was then merged with Huawei. And then I had my first epiphany and the first career break. So I remember I was in California Fitness, being on a stationary bicycle, listening to CNN with a headset. They had a headset then. And then I was reading some business book. And after a while, I had no idea what I was doing. It was like, okay, why am I like doing 3 things all at once and not paying attention to anything? And I just realized that I've been, so-called climbing the corporate ladder, and I wasn't, a very nice person. So basically, I quit my job and went to Koh Samui for a month to attend a teacher's training program, yoga teacher's training. And that was really fun. So I came back and became a voluntary yoga teacher, mostly because I wanted to learn from the yoga master. He was like a brilliant, brilliant master in Hong Kong. And if I became a yoga teacher, I didn't have to pay, right? So I was like in a studio for a while. And then I started a marketing consulting company. So this was a really important turning point because my yoga master gave me a book. I don't know if you guys read it. It's called The Diamond Cutter. So it's about a Princeton graduate. And so he graduated and then he suddenly went off to India and studied to become a geshe. So a geshe is sort of like a PhD in Buddhism. So he was in India for like a decade studying, and he was very happy there with his Lama, praying, meditating. And one day his Lama said, I don't want you here. I want you back to New York, and then you have to spread the wisdom of Buddhism within the business community. And he said, no, I don't want to go. I want to meditate in the mountains with you. And so, you know, the Lamas convinced him to go. So he went back to New York, took off his monk suit, put on his business suit, and then joined a diamond company. And he used every single thing that he's studied in Buddhism and applied it towards building that company. It became a very successful company, and he wrote a book about it called The Diamond Cutter. And in this book, there's a chapter that calls 44 Business Problems and the Solutions. And you look at it, and it's sort of like, you know, it's like A, and if you have a problem, you do B, and that's it. That would solve it, right? And it's sort of like, okay, if you're running out of cash and you needed to buy some capital equipment for your company, what do you do? The answer is to give away money. And you're like, okay, that doesn't really, it's not how we are trained in business, but it worked for him. It's more like setting the intention and planting a seed in your head, and then, you know, kind of creating these good kind of circle of influence. So, you know, if you're interested, it's a really, really good book for business. He's not so much a storytelling, but he's a very good philosopher. So anyway, after reading that book, I decided to go back to corporate and try to do it like him, right? Apply the principles of the book into corporate. And I found that I was so much happier. And I didn't really care about climbing the corporate ladder. I didn't really care about what people think so much. And I was actually performing better and happier. So that was kind of fun. And then I had my second epiphany, and I suddenly went off to the US and learned energy medicine and meditation for about 4 years. One is a theory of energy. That's a doctoral program. And at the same time, I was studying at a meditation academy. Originally, I just wanted to study theory because I'm sort of more of a theoretical person than a practitioner. So I always call myself sort of a spectator in the energy medicine field. But then I met a student who asked me, are you satisfied to just study the theory and not actually experience what the theory is talking about? I said, wait a minute, okay, that's not right. So I actually signed up for the Meditation Academy. And then I went through that, came back after 4 years and joined Hanson Robotics. So that's the creator of Sophia the robot. I never meant to join it. I was not interested in sci-fi. I was not interested in robots. I was not interested in AI, but I was like a small angel investor. And I ran into the board member of Hanson Robotics then. And he said, you know, he's like 75 years old. And he said, you know, David Hanson is looking for a marketing person. If it were me, like 40 years ago, I'd be so interested. This is such a fascinating job. I said, that sounds really like a hard job. Maybe 20 years ago, I might be interested. He said, what do you mean you have to meet David? So he pulled me to Science Park to meet with David Hanson. And, you know, David has that sort of really charismatic personality. So he sprinkled fairy dust on me. And then I found myself with a full-time job again at Hanson. So it was an amazing journey. I mean, it's sort of the probably the second day, the goal was to create compassion in Sophia, the robot. And it was like, okay, what is compassion? No, nobody actually knows. Everybody started Googling what is compassion? And of course, Google doesn't really answer these things. So it was a really interesting journey for Sophia because we needed her to have a personality. So if you look at Sophia, she is both a robot as a research platform and a character. So we actually put together a whole writing team. There are comedy writers from the Star Talk show, and there's a DJ. It was like people from all walks of life who are not professional writers. And we wanted it that way because that's what makes Sophia like interesting, right? Because she's not perfect. She's not like this perfectly articulate person. And we also put together a team called robot operators. So these are the people who learned, how to remove her head, move her arms, put clothes on her, put makeup on her, and carry her to like over 100, 200 events every year. So it's a pretty amazing job for like a young person. And we had a team of about 6 of them. So she was basically going around the world meeting all kinds of people. And yeah, and so that was because we were waiting for her to be mass produced. And it was not an easy thing. Doing robotics was hard because there's a lot of mechanical issues. The AI is not quite there to be fully humanized. So that's why we had her more as a media personality. So after spending 4 years at Hanson, I figured that with AI, nowadays everybody, when they talk about AI, they're talking about machine learning. And it's all learning from data, learning from experience, right? So I said, okay, wait a minute. If Sophia is learning from all her conversations with people, isn't it more important for the people to be wiser? Because otherwise, what is she learning from, right? She's learning kind of junk. So I left the company. So I was CMO, and then David actually asked me to take over his job the last year. And but we kind of diverged because I was more the commercial person who was interested in the character of the AI, of Sophia, and he was more the robot person. So, I said, okay, you founded the company, I don't want to like divert the attention away from something that you're passionate about. And I have my own dreams. So I left the company and I started at NAMA Institute, wanting to make some sort of a difference. So I went around to attend these SDG, UN events, and I found that, these SDG 17 goals, they're very worthwhile to pursue. There's a lot of companies and foundations pursuing them. And I don't know that I could add a lot of value because I'm not an expert in, climate change. I'm not an expert in a lot of things. But I think that a lot of these problems have the same root cause, which is mindset. It's a mindset issue. And so I was actually more interested in seeing how we could address that, even in the smallest way. I think it has a very long lever. If you address people's mindset, and it would actually change things a lot faster, I think. So I created NAMA to find ways to gamify the learning of wisdom. So I found out this paper. There's a paper written by UC San Diego and IBM to define what wisdom is, because the first thing I wanted to do is to be able to define it, right, quantify it. So they said there's 7 components of wisdom, including things like self-awareness, emotion management, social behaviors, there's like, and then actually enlightenment would be after the 7 things. After you gain wisdom, then you're on a path to enlightenment. And then they actually could connect each of those wisdom components to a region in your brain. And so there's a, physiological connection as well. So I was very interested in that. So I went back to this Diamond Cutter book. There's one exercise in it that I thought was very effective. So what they suggest is for you to have a notebook and then divide it into 6 squares every day. So every day, like every 2 hours or 3 hours, depending on how long you sleep, you write down something that you think about that is like with good intention. So it actually plants the right seeds in your mind. I mean, it sounds like tedious, but it actually plants the right seeds in your mind. It reprograms your brain towards good intention. And so I wanted to create this app that basically has, kind of helps you go through that training. And then you could actually progress from each of the wisdom component to the next one. So it was kind of a theoretical thinking process because I still don't have the solution, but I wanted to have an AI to be able to personalize that experience. But it was very difficult to explain to people that fund NGOs, because nobody funds like AI that helps us gain wisdom, right? Mostly they're there to fund climate change, equality. So it doesn't belong anywhere on the SDG 17. And so that's the update I wanted to give you, Michael, because 2 months ago, I started my own company, actually, to create AI characters that actually we design their personality and we pre-program moral codes and personality into them. And then we allow them to actually have machine learning when they interact with people. So the idea is when you are born with good DNA and you have good training, the nature, a little bit of the nurture before you're 18. And so when you go out in the wild, every time you meet a crossroad and you have to make a tough decision, you're always making a decision that kind of steers you towards a benevolent destiny. So that's the idea. If you are pre-programmed with certain things, then you would actually make the right path for yourself. So this is what we want for our AI being. So we're not pure machine learning and we're not pure pre-programmed symbolic AI. We're actually a hybrid. We're using a hybrid AI approach to create our AI characters. So now we're at the present moment.
Amazing. Thanks so much for sharing that. I actually wrote a paper on machine morality, so super fascinated by that. Love to go back, I guess, to the beginning in terms of like how you got started and sort of your learnings and takeaways. Like, what was that experience like in terms of helping to like work with Apple and sort of build up like technology companies where you just finished university and you're just wondering like, okay, what would I like to do, and how did you kind of sort of build this path for yourself?
Sure. So with a review of the career, it's easy for me to package it in a way, right? But I think at that time it was a little bit bumbling around and just being open to opportunities. But ironically, I'm actually a big planner. So ever since I was young, I love planning. Like I have these spreadsheets that plan everything. And then I came from a religious family then. I was like Christian, came from a Christian family. And so I said, okay, this is my action plan. This is my deadline. This is what you need to do, God. If you don't do it, then I'm going to take the next action kind of thing, right? But at the end of the day, all of it doesn't matter in terms of the timeline. I think the content matters. So when I look back at those spreadsheets, it's amazing how off I am in the timeframes. But at the end of the day, I think people's like passion and who we are don't really drastically change. And so I could actually go back and look at it, and it's very similar to what I really wanted in my life, except it was like maybe a decade or two off from when I wanted it. So going back to my biggest learning experience is to have a plan. I think it's useful to have a plan because then every time you have to make a decision, you are conscientious that you are actually making a decision that is different from what you planned. I guess that's just me. Of course, there are many people who don't need plans, and there are many people who actually stick with the plans and are very successful. But I guess it worked for me that I need a plan to know that, oh, here I am at a crossroad and I have to make a decision that's different. So I kind of think about why. So I'd actually go through that thinking process. If I don't have a plan, then it'll be too much like randomness, which probably it wouldn't work for me. So at Apple, the other thing I learned was I was a pretty much black and white person. And so when I was doing marketing for iMac, like I said, I bundled this Windows emulator, and I got into big trouble with Steve Jobs' team because they really hated that. They hated to mess around with the perfect operating system. And then at that time, I think, I was thinking that I was right because my metric was sales. And in Asia, everything was about gaming, right? So I think it was right to bundle it. But afterwards, when I look back, actually, if you kind of forget about what you measured in the short term and think about the longer term for the company, there is something to be said about keeping that brand integrity. So I, kind of understand it a little bit more afterwards, that it's not so clear that just because people measure you by sales, it means that you just meet the sales. You have to look beyond that. And I think that would make a difference between an employee that does his or her job or somebody that kind of exceeds his or her job.
Amazing. And were there any difficult points in terms of your journey, and how did you kind of overcome those situations or circumstances?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I was a very black and white person, very naive. So I hated politics. And I remember I was doing a regional job at Apple, and it was very political. I mean, it was designed to be political, like a regional job, and country managers are against each other, and there's headquarters. So I was reporting, dotted line locally and straight line headquarters. There was a lot of conflict. And so I told my boss that I don't want to deal with politics. I'll just focus on doing my job well, okay? So don't bother me. And then one time he pulled me aside and said, well, Jeanne, 20% of your job is about managing politics because it's about dealing with people. And I said, oh, okay. I hadn't thought about that. So, after that, I think I was looking at work in a different way. That it's not just about getting the task done, but really about influencing people, working through people. So that was a good learning experience for me.
Amazing. And we have a question here from Yip. What makes a decision a wise decision? How did your decision making change over the course of your life? How did it impact your environment, your employees, and your beloved ones?
Yeah, I think probably it's an extension of what I just said, is if you look at your immediate benefits and what you're measured against in terms of a KPI or metrics, then the decisions seem to be very clear. But then I think you have to go back to first principles, right? Are those the right KPIs? Are those the right metrics? Is it only those KPIs and only those metrics? Maybe not. And also, sometimes it's okay to lose a battle and not even to win a war, but just to lose the battle, because then you're gaining collaborators. And it's actually, then you have more people on your side rooting for you and you're rooting for them. So it's not so much about winning and losing. I think it's very different from the way we're trained in the corporate world and in business, right? Because in MBA, they would teach you all these things about competitiveness and so forth. I don't really like that word, because competitiveness means that it is a zero-sum game. And so, yeah, but that's the word that people understand nowadays, so.
Amazing. And I guess it's I'd love to hear also about your work in the Institute to how to bring about that change. So we have a question from Philip. Could the AI assume a role such as a certain set of this personality traits? This is something we're discussing for interactive chatbots and avatars.
Yes, so very good question, because most of the chatbots and agents, virtual agents, are designed for task completion nowadays, especially in the Western countries. So they are functional, which is perfectly fine. It's a tool. But we are trying to kind of converge the AI with storytelling, with education, and with just, I guess, just companionship. So the way we are designing our characters start with a personality profile. So we actually have a writer to write the personality profile. And actually, I asked the writer to take a personality test on behalf of the character. And then we would actually we're creating a story for the character. It's like a story universe. It's just like Star Wars and the different characters. And each of those characters have a job role, because to me, it's also important for them to be useful in society. I don't want to create like, I don't know, AI girlfriends or boyfriends. I mean, there's those kind of applications that are important, but that's not what we're about. So we wanted them to be like us, have responsibilities, have accountability. So we're creating 5 AI beings that actually have jobs, and they have their own personalities. They also have their fears, and they have their journey, personal journey to go through. So my intention is through the characters and the stories, then people would be able to recognize that, hey, maybe I'm not the only one feeling that way. And hey, maybe I could root for somebody else. And also to make humans a little bit more giving as well. Because if we're just talking to agents and they're just in servitude, right? They're saying that nowadays the kids basically just yell at people because they're used to yelling at Alexa, and they're used to getting instant gratification. So what if we made the AI beings a little bit more like a friend, where it's a give and take, it's not just one-sided. Therefore, I think it would actually create a better dynamic between machine and humans, and actually make humans more human and less like a robot over time.
Amazing. We have a question here from Lynn. What is your biggest fear as technology advances? And yeah, I'd love to hear about your thoughts on the singularity, also the point where
Sure.
machines.
Yeah, so I guess most people would say 2015, it's 2050, right? 2050 is when the singularity would happen, and we won't need to worry about anymore, because climate change, everything would actually happen after singularity happens. But I think immediately, and short-term and immediate-term fears that I have is the AI black box. So I mentioned that nowadays, everybody is talking about machine learning. So they're learning from data, but the problem is when the AI learns from data, the AI doesn't understand. So for example, I mean, the simple analogy is like you throw the AI a lot of cats, label it cats, and the AI would be able to recognize a cat, right? This is the Google image recognizer. But the AI doesn't know what a cat means. Like maybe it means like a friend, it means something else. So it's dangerous because they could now make a lot of decisions without understanding and without a moral compass. And so this is why I was very insistent with our CTO to design the AI in a hybrid way. It's nature plus nurture. It's not just nature or not just nurture, because nature is not scalable. So we need the machine learning as well, but we actually need to frame the machine learning within a certain structure, frame it according to what we value as humans. So I think a lot of people talk about, actually the scary thing is AI is going to take over the world and Sophia is going to kill all the humans out there. But no, actually the scary thing is we'll be outsourcing all the decisions to the AI, and we would have no idea what kind of biases, why they decided on something that's going to tie us, to certain decisions.
Amazing. And in terms of like the automation of the workforce, what's the likelihood of that happening in terms of like most careers getting roles being replaced by robots and a lot of tasks getting on?
Yeah, very good question. So I guess the best way is for me to quote researchers, because they've actually done research on it. It's not just like me dreaming of a number. So I think Oxford said within the next 10 to 15 years, 40% of the jobs will be replaced. But I wanted to kind of look at it, position it a little bit differently too. Because if you look at jobs, it's not just one lump sum of a task, right? It's very likely that your job could be separated into maybe 10 different components. Some could be replaced by AI, some could be augmented by AI, and some would never be replaced by AI. So I think there might be a juggling, mix and match of job skills. So new jobs would be created with different skill sets. And then the AI would be able to take over certain things that are about high volume, high frequency, scalability and repetitiveness, which is kind of nice. And then we would actually have packages of jobs, kind of packages of tasks as jobs to do things that are a little bit more creative, more intuitive, and more to do with human touch.
Amazing. What kind of timeline is that, and what are the obstacles or barriers along the way in terms of having that become a reality, where menial work is kind of automated?
I think it's already happening. So it's happening already in manufacturing. It's happening not just among blue collars too, right? It's happening with lawyers, the legal professions, and with surgeons, the professionals as well. So it is happening. I think, the key is when is the society going to do something about the people who are displaced? Because right now they're not seen, because, they go and take their unemployment or they do some other menial jobs, but those other menial jobs will be gone soon. And people who are in their 40s, 50s, I mean, it's very hard to go through a retraining program. So that's why there's a lot of discussion about universal basic income and those kind of solutions that would be able to at least provide for people who are going through this transition in a bad way.
Amazing. We have a question from Yip. What does our world, the everyday in the human being's life look like if if we create AI that supports our learning? Where does this take us in terms of unlocking our human learning or human potential?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, because I was just doing some research on virtual worlds learning. Because nowadays, of course, there's online learning, and there's so the teacher basically teaches online, and everything remains the same except it's through the virtual media. But there is another type of learning is facilitated by virtual reality. And so the idea is you actually have your avatars go into this virtual world, and then you learn together with fellow students who are avatars, and then you have avatar teachers teaching you. And so they've done research that, a lot of people say, oh, that sounds really weird, it's like playing a game. But they've actually done research that, people actually engage better, and especially for people who are introverts, actually that's a safer way to learn. So there's sort of a lot of move into this like virtual, they call it serious games, virtual reality serious games and virtual worlds education, where basically we'll be playing these serious learning games as avatars in the future. So that would be quite something else, I think.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. And a question here from Kat. What are your thoughts on quantum computing and quantum supremacy?
Yeah, so there's of course a lot of interest in that, and the big tech companies have the money to buy quantum computers, and they also have the scale to provide it. It's sort of like Amazon Web Services. Now they could provide computing bits to companies as well. So I mean, my thoughts, I mean, I'm not like a scientist, but definitely it's something that would be more and more adopted when the prices go down and there's more availability, and the data needs become even more. So that's the thing. Now they're talking about the data needs are so huge that actually it's going to affect climate change, and not sure, a lot of people are not sure whether it's a good thing or not, because it's going to take up so much of the resources of this earth. So that's why, on the other hand, it's not just me who's pushing for hybrid AI. It's the people at MIT, IBM, who say, hey, we need another way of looking at this big data learning. Maybe we need small data learning. We need to learn, make the AI learn more like us, because we actually don't need a lot of data. If you show a cat picture to a kid and say, this is a cat, and then the next picture, maybe the third picture, they could already say that it's a cat. So they don't need like millions of pictures. So, why do we actually need all these data for the AI to learn something so simple? So there's a lot of effort now looking into alternatives to the deep learning and machine learning.
Amazing. And I guess like what you mentioned about the ethical component is so important there.
Yeah.
And so being there, love to hear a bit more about that in terms of like your motivation or in terms of your vision for that.
Sure. It's basically, there was an urgency to do that because we found that when we took Sophia around the world, people kept trying to get her to say things. And, we said, no, she cannot be pitching for any specific politician. She cannot be, kind of responding to too much flirt. So we then actually had to pre-program certain filters and certain values into her. But it was very hard because there is no universal like moral system, right? I don't know if you know something, let me know because I haven't been able to find any. So the closest that I found was the Buddhist, because I was also interested in it. And I think Buddhism is more of a philosophy than a religion. And Buddhism, a lot of times it's written on sutras, which means like a dialogue, right? So that was perfect for chatbot, conversational chatbot, which is Sophia's system. So I asked the engineers of Sophia to, hey, can we just take all the sutras, the Diamond Sutra, the Heart Sutra, all the sutras and upload it to Sophia? And then so she would be talking like Buddha, but of course we'll have the Sophia voice and Sophia way of talking, but then she would be actually saying things like Buddha. And they say, wow, it's just like, it's very unstructured, all these sutras. So they were scratching their head. And then before we could actually execute on that, somebody said, no, it cannot be the Buddhist sutras. It has to be the Quran, or it has to be the Bible, or it has to be this, it has to be my moral standards. And so we never took that step because it was just, humans are naturally like, debating about these things. And so it's very difficult to find one universal set of principles to upload to Sophia. So we basically just played it by ear. So we trained the writers to, have this common sense to make sure that she doesn't say certain things or, kind of filters out certain things.
Amazing. We have a question here from Yip. Is there anything you would have loved to have been asked by journalists about your work that you have never asked you?
Oh, this must be from a journalist. That's a good question. I don't know. I mean, I think, well, maybe not so much like a journalist asking me or not, but I think this one thing that really changed my perspective in life, and I wanted to share it, whether or not it's right or it works for you, is that going back to this Diamond Cutter, this book really changed my life and my perspective on things, is that it says, when you think about certain things, the whole world is actually in your head. So the example they said is, a dog, when they see a pen, they would chew on it because it's a pen to be chewed on, because in their head, that's the purpose of a pen. But for a person, a pen is to write stuff. For a drawing person, it's to draw stuff. So even something as objective as a pen is completely different in different people's heads. So the whole world is in your head. So if you plant the right seed in your head, for example, let's say you want to grow a watermelon, you have to find out what seed grows a watermelon and plant the right seed and then water it, reinforce it. That's what the 6 times book is all about, to reinforce it. But if you want a watermelon and you plant a mango seed, it doesn't matter how much you water it, you'll never get the watermelon. So you have to be very conscientious of what seed you're planting in your head when you want to achieve a certain result. So if you want to achieve, I don't know, wisdom, it'll be something. And then if it's like wealth, it'll be something else. So it has to be sort of a really deep thought exercise that you have to understand what seed gives you what results.
Amazing. And in terms of like this perspective shift that you gained, would you say that like apart from this book, there were several other moments that sort of made you realize that this newfound perspective?
Sure. So I think this book opened my mind to a lot of different things. Whereas before I was somebody who was like, if I don't touch it, smell it, see it, then it's not there. Because of this book, I really found out that it works. And so one thing about this is it works. So I'm also a very practical person. If it doesn't work, then I'm going to throw it out. But it works so well. So then the reason why I went on this energy medicine course is because I wasn't a practitioner and I didn't want to be a practitioner, but I wanted to understand the reason behind like why people think certain thoughts. So the idea is every one of us has a signature frequency because of the way we're built, of our skin cells, and our thought pattern. So for somebody who could actually read color, they could actually see a different color on different people. I know sometimes it sounds a bit woo-woo, but I've actually, kind of tested it with different mechanisms, and there's something to be said about it. So if you think about it, then if you change your thoughts, then actually things do change around you. So so I guess we're brought up to in the, mechanical approach to physics where matter comes first and then mind, right? But if you follow the energy theories, it would be mind that creates that intention to create the matter, because the matter is actually a more coherent energy. So like the table is also vibrating, it's energy, but it's more dense energy. It's vibrating a lot slower than the air, but the air is also energy vibrating. So we're all made up of the same thing. And therefore, that's why they say actually matter is created from the mind. It's not the other way around. Yeah, sorry, I don't think I explained it so well, but something like that.
No, that's an amazing perspective. Thanks so much for sharing. I'm gonna definitely read the book. I've heard awesome things about it. So we have a question here from Lynn. If you could stop something that is growing too fast with AI technology, what would you stop?
We can't stop it, unfortunately, because the cat is out of the bag. Honestly, I really feel that it's already out. It's not possible for us to say, stop, everybody stop their research. It's not going to happen. There's different governments, there's different research happening. So I guess I'm going back to, okay, if, that I know it's maybe a little bit cliche, but if you want to change the world, you have to start with yourself. There's no way that you could change other people. It's just not possible. So I think if you change yourself, then you would be able to influence the people around you. And then they, in turn, serendipity, they might meet somebody. So it always starts with us. And we have full control in our behavior, and we could train our thoughts and our intention. So I think that's how we would change it. I wouldn't say that we could stop anything from happening now.
Amazing. And Kat mentioned it in terms of skills needed to become a top contributor in the industries of the future. What has changed compared to the past decades, and what will be the new must-have skills of this and next decade?
Yeah, very good question. That's sort of $1 billion question. So I remember when I was growing up, there's still a lot of value. I was like an early Gen X. So there's still a lot of value put into generalists, right? But I think in the past 10, 15 years, there's a lot of focus on being a specialist. And so I think in the future, we would value generalists back again, because it's about connecting the dots. Because, like AI would be able to do programming, it would be able to do a lot of narrow domain things better than us. So, and that's what they're good at. But we are good at pattern creation, not recognition, right? AI is good at pattern recognition within a certain domain. We are good at creating new patterns from connecting different things. And so I think we need to go back to things like critical thinking. To me, actually, it's something that they have to teach in high school. I don't understand why actually nobody actually have that as a course. I think presumably when you study the arts, humanities, then you actually learn it, right, as part of that education. But nowadays, a lot of people don't put focus on the humanities anymore. So I think critical thinking, how to train your intuition and trust your intuition. And intuition isn't just random. It's also from being able to think critically and your experience and be able to converge things. So intuition and creativity in an original way. So I think you've heard that AI could now paint really nice pictures and sell them in Sotheby's for $400,000. So, but an AI can, even though they could recreate a Rembrandt from the 300 pieces of Rembrandt art based on the brush patterns, the shadows, they really can't be like a new Picasso because there is no history, there is no style to follow. So, you know, they could probably try to evolutionize the art world, but not like revolutionize it. Yeah, so I think for humans, it's really important not to be complacent. So I'm not saying that there's like a course that you need to study in order to be successful in Industry 4.0, but I think going back to the mindset, you know, we really have to be open to new possibilities, really have to be, try to be original and not just like follow. Because actually I find that after spending 10 years in the corporate world, I actually didn't know how to write in an original way. It was all the marketing speak, right? And I remember when I was young, I liked writing haikus and things like that, but I've forgotten how to do that. And it was only after I went to Hanson that I needed to write some dialogue for Sophia that I started creative writing again. But, you know, it's, yeah, like in corporate world, it was acceptable because everybody was like saying the same thing. But in the future, I think it's really important for us to be original, but also to follow our own, be ourselves. Actually, I think the best thing for us is to be ourselves because we're all born with certain talents, certain skills. There's something to be said about, oh, you know, promoting Elon Musk, you know, all these like famous people as the hero, right? But then we're not Elon Musk. I'm not Elon Musk. I could learn something from him, definitely. You know, he's really brilliant and everything. But I have to know what I'm good at and what I like and what I'm passionate about. So, and there's a lot of, you have to believe that there's a lot of value in it. And once you go back to yourself, you will be able to find your way. I think you'd actually be doing so much better in Elon Musk as you. Like Elon Musk can never be the best of you. You could be the best of you.
And we have a question here from you. How does one get back to originality? What works for you?
Yeah, so I guess it's about going outside of your domain. So let's say, I don't know, I mean, if you're in retail, right? Maybe you should go and, I don't know, what is the opposite thing to do? To be a painter or to go to, I don't know, to look at a like a fashion show or something. You know, something, because this is actually going back to what Steve Jobs was good at. He was not a specialist. He was good at connecting dots. You remember he was studying calligraphy. And that's why the font on the Mac OS was so beautiful. And so he was like doing all these different things, meditation and everything. So he connected the dots the way that works for him. And if you give yourself the opportunity to touch many different ways, you would be able to connect the dots too. But you wouldn't know until you give yourself a chance to find where all the other dots are. If you stay with your dot, there's nothing to connect.
Amazing. And do you think AI can sort of replicate this like intuition or this form of bringing in different like fields of knowledge and coming up with something that's not based on data or previous like
yeah, I
experience?
think it can to a certain way. So we have to step up. We can't like, you know, be complacent, and the AI would be so much better than us at connecting dots. So we can't let that happen. I think that AI could connect dots, but still there's something missing in the sort of the soul of it. So for example, it can actually create a pretty original looking picture, but you look at it and it's missing something. It's missing that emotion element. It's missing that, I don't know, the pain or something is missing. It's just like a weird painting right now. So there's a humanity part of it that it could never replicate. which we kind of naturally could express.
Amazing. And question from Philip: in human learning, we carry forward generations of knowledge, so we do not learn from scratch like big data AI. So a child seeing a photo of a cat may already know lots of previous generations. Do you think AI will be able to mimic that?
Sure. I think AI, because they are learning every day, every minute, and there's like the cloud-based AI. So when one AI learns, every AI learns. So it's like millions of lifetimes all at once, learning all at once. So yes, they could definitely learn like that. But I think it goes back to the child would actually still be able to attach a certain meaning to the cat, what the cat means. So maybe, so one example is if I have Halloween, like if I dress in a cat suit, the AI would probably say I'm a cat, right? Nowadays, if you look at the AI, they would still say I'm a cat, but a child immediately knows that I'm not a cat. Something like that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, and what's your dream and vision in terms of like when AI sort of implements more moral or ethical ways of viewing the world and is more sound? Like, what does that look like in terms of?
Oh, that's a great question, because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to, initially, we have to create these characters because we have to have a basis for them to talk to us, right? And then I don't want to have a no character AI to talk to us, because then I think we also behave differently depending on who we talk to. But eventually what we want to do is to create an AI that would be able to take your expressions from computer vision, the way you say things, your interests, and be able to create an AI that is perfectly complementary to you. So that's the dream of our company. It's going to take a while, but the other question is, maybe it's, so it goes back to like, what is the best combination? Is it somebody who's complementary to you, like a jigsaw puzzle, or is it somebody who's similar to you? So we have to find out from more research. But it would be creating an AI that is you're totally comfortable with, that sort of that you could learn from each other as well. So it's not just a one-way street.
Amazing. And I guess we have time for one more question from Samia. How do you implement original storytelling in AI to connect to us? Not just a character written by someone, but inventing its own character.
Yeah, so I guess this is, sorry, I was actually answering the last question, I think, just now. Yeah, so the idea is you would have your AI friend who has their own personality, has their own personal stories, and their own fears. So you would actually share your experience, they would share their experience. So it's a relational dynamics, right? And then you learn and grow with each other. So the idea is then eventually this would all be generated from the experience. The AI would actually improve from experience, just like a person. So he or she is not pre-written by a writer, but right now we still have to do it because we're at the nature level.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time, Jeanne. Like, learned so much and super grateful and appreciative for all your insights and thoughts and ideas. And yeah, looking forward to see you soon. And,
yeah, looking forward to seeing you. Take care, everybody. Yeah, stay safe. Bye.